I'm Sarah, 34F, and I've been married to Jack, 35M, for 8 years. Our love story began in college. We were both studying engineering and bonded over late-night study sessions and shared dreams of building a life together. After graduation, we got married and settled in a small town where Jack landed a job as a long-haul truck driver. I found work as a project manager at a local construction firm, and we were excited to start our life together. 3 years into our marriage, we welcomed our son, Ethan, 7M. The pregnancy was difficult, and the delivery was even harder. I had severe complications that left me hospitalized for weeks after Ethan was born. Jack had to take extended leave from work to care for both of us. It was a challenging time, but it brought us closer together as we navigated new parenthood. However, our world turned upside down when Ethan was diagnosed with severe ADHD at the age of 4. Suddenly, our energetic little boy who we thought was just spirited became a whirlwind of activity that required constant supervision. Simple tasks like getting dressed or eating a meal could turn into hour-long ordeals filled with distractions and meltdowns. I made the difficult decision to leave my job to care for Ethan full-time. It was a financial strain, but we felt it was necessary. I started working part-time from home as a virtual assistant to help make ends meet. Jack had to increase his time on the road to compensate for the loss of my income, often being away for weeks at a time. The strain on our marriage was palpable. When Jack was home, he was often exhausted and struggled to connect with Ethan, whose behavior he found overwhelming. I felt isolated and overwhelmed, juggling Ethan's needs, my work, and trying to maintain some semblance of a household. Our social life dwindled to almost nothing. Playdates often ended in tears, either Ethan's or the other children's, as his impulsivity and inability to follow social cues led to conflicts. Parents in our community, while outwardly sympathetic, began to avoid us. Even family gatherings became stressful events that we often chose to skip. It was during this challenging time that my sister Lisa, 38F, reached out after years of estrangement. Lisa and I had been close as children, but we drifted apart in our teens. She fell in with a rough crowd, dropped out of high school, and left home at 17. Over the years, I heard snippets about her life through our parents. She had 2 kids, Max, 14M, and Zoe, 10F, from different fathers who weren't in the picture. When Lisa called out of the blue, I was thrilled. We talked for hours, catching up on lost time. She spoke about her kids with such love, and I found myself envying the seemingly normal family life she described. We made plans for her to visit with the kids. The day of their visit arrived, and I was a bundle of nerves. I cleaned the house top to bottom, prepared Ethan as best I could for meeting new people, and even baked cookies, something I rarely had the energy to do anymore. When they arrived, I was shocked. Lisa looked much older than her 38 years, with a gaunt face and nervous demeanor. Max, at 14, seemed much older than his years, his eyes wary and protective as he ushered in his younger sister, Zoe. The little girl clung to her brother, her clothes slightly too small and her hair unbrushed. As the day progressed, the reality of their situation became clear. Lisa was jumpy and distracted, constantly checking her phone. Max took charge of getting Zoe a snack and making sure she was comfortable. When Ethan had a meltdown over sharing his toys, it was Max who stepped in with a calm demeanor, distracting Ethan with a new game while Zoe quietly cleaned up the scattered toys. That night, after they left, I couldn't sleep. The contrast between the family Lisa had described on the phone and the reality I'd seen was stark. I spent the next week trying to convince myself that I was overreacting, that maybe they were just having a bad day. But then Max called me. His voice was shaky as he asked if they could come over again. When I agreed, he hesitated before adding, "Can we stay the night?" Mom's not doing so good." That weekend, the truth came out. Lisa had been struggling with drug addiction for years. She would have periods of sobriety, during which she'd be the mother Max and Zoe deserved, but the relapses were becoming more frequent and severe. Max, at 14, was essentially raising Zoe while trying to keep up with school and cover for his mother's absences. I was devastated and angry at Lisa for putting her children through this, angry at myself for not knowing, for not being there. But mostly, I felt an overwhelming need to protect Max and Zoe. I spent the next week in a flurry of phone calls, to CPS, to lawyers, to Jack. Jack was on a long haul to the West Coast, and our conversations were brief and tense. He was sympathetic but wary, reminding me that we were already stretched thin with Ethan's needs. When CPS conducted their investigation and offered me emergency custody of Max and Zoe, I accepted without hesitation. It wasn't until after I'd signed the papers that the reality of what I'd done hit me. I'd made a life-changing decision without really consulting my husband. The next few weeks were a blur of adjustments. Max and Zoe settled into our spare room, enrolling in local schools. To my surprise, they formed a quick bond with Ethan. Max had a calm, patient way with him that seemed to soothe Ethan's more manic moments. Zoe, despite being only 10, had a nurturing spirit that drew Ethan to her. For the first time in years, I saw my son forming genuine friendships. The house was fuller, louder, but also happier. Yes, it was chaotic and challenging, but seeing the positive changes in Ethan, seeing Max and Zoe slowly relax and act like kids their age, it felt right. But my relationship with Jack was suffering. Our phone calls became shorter, tenser. When I told him I was applying for full custody of Max and Zoe, he exploded. He accused me of making unilateral decisions that affected our whole family, of not considering how this would impact Ethan and our marriage. I tried to explain the emergency nature of the situation, how I couldn't in good conscience send Max and Zoe back into foster care or to their mother. But Jack wouldn't listen. He ended the call saying he needed time to think. Now, Jack is due to come home next week for his monthly break. Max and Zoe are nervous, having picked up on the tension in my phone calls with Jack. Ethan keeps asking when Daddy is coming home, excited to show him how well he's been doing with his new brother and sister. I love Jack and I understand his reservations. Taking in 2 kids, especially teenagers, is a huge adjustment. But I can't ignore the positive changes I've seen in our household. Max and Zoe need us, and if I'm honest, we needed them too. They've brought a new energy, a new purpose to our lives. But I'm scared. Scared that Jack won't be able to accept this change, that I've made a decision that could potentially end our marriage. Scared of how I'd manage on my own if it came to that, raising 3 kids, one with special needs, on my limited income. Am I the asshole for adopting my niece and nephew without my husband's approval, knowing it could potentially end our marriage? I feel stuck between my commitment to my marriage and my duty to these children who have no one else to turn to. Update 1, it's been 3 months since my original post, and I wanted to update you all on our situation. First, I want to thank everyone for their advice and support. Your comments gave me the courage to face the difficult conversations I needed to have. When Jack came home for his break, I knew we needed to have a serious talk. The night he arrived, after the kids were in bed, we sat down at our kitchen table, the same table where we'd shared so many meals, made so many plans for our future. The familiarity of the setting contrasted sharply with the tension between us. I started by apologizing for making such a big decision without properly consulting him. Then, I explained everything in detail, how I found Max and Zoe's living situation, the emergency custody process, and why I felt I couldn't turn my back on them. I told him about the positive changes I'd seen in Ethan, how for the first time, he seemed to have real friends. Jack listened, his face unreadable. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice low and controlled. He said he understood why I did what I did, but he couldn't accept it. He told me he felt like a stranger in his own home, that this wasn't the life he'd signed up for. He'd never wanted more children, especially not ones with such complex needs and backgrounds. His words hurt, but I could see the pain in his eyes too. This wasn't easy for him. I asked him to give it time, to try and get to know Max and Zoe before making any final decisions. To my surprise, he agreed to stay for a month instead of his usual week, saying he'd use some of his accumulated leave time. The first 2 weeks were incredibly tense. Jack mostly kept to himself, only really interacting with Ethan. Max and Zoe tried their best to stay out of his way, which broke my heart. I encouraged them to be themselves and not walk on eggshells in their own home, but I could see the worry in their eyes. They'd already been abandoned by so many adults in their lives, they were scared of being sent away again. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, things began to change. It started with small moments, Jack asking Max to pass the salt at dinner, or nodding a greeting to Zoe in the morning. Then, one day, Jack's truck needed some minor repairs. Max, who's always been interested in mechanics, a hobby he'd picked up trying to keep his mom's old car running, offered to help. Jack was hesitant but allowed it. I watched from the kitchen window as they worked on the truck together. At first, there was little conversation, just the clinking of tools. But as the afternoon wore on, I saw Jack showing Max how to do certain tasks, heard the low murmur of their voices as Max asked questions and Jack answered. Meanwhile, Zoe, always the peacemaker, started leaving little notes for Jack, drawings, jokes, or just sweet messages saying things like "have a good day." At first, he ignored them, but after a while, I noticed him smiling when he found a new one. He even started leaving replies, simple things like "thanks" or "you too," but it was a start. The real breakthrough came during a family dinner about 3 weeks into Jack's stay. Ethan, overwhelmed by the noise and activity, had a major meltdown. Usually, Jack would try to handle it on his own, often making things worse with his frustration. This time, before either of us could react, Max calmly approached Ethan. He knelt down to Ethan's level, spoke softly to him, and started doing some breathing exercises he'd learned from me. To our amazement, Ethan began to calm down, mirroring Max's deep breaths. Jack watched this interaction with a mix of surprise and something that looked like respect. Later that night, he admitted he'd never seen Ethan respond so well to anyone other than me. As the month drew to a close, Jack sat me down again. He said he still had reservations, but he could see how Max and Zoe had become part of our family. He apologized for his initial reaction and behavior, admitting he'd been scared of the change and the added responsibility. He also confessed that seeing Max and Zoe had brought up some of his own childhood issues. Jack's father had left when he was young, and he'd always feared not being a good enough father himself. We're not out of the woods yet, but Jack has agreed to family counseling when he's home. He's also making an effort to bond with Max and Zoe, even calling them when he's on the road. Last week, he helped Max with a school project over video call, and yesterday he and Zoe had a long chat about a book she's reading for class. It's a start, and I'm cautiously optimistic. There's still a long road ahead of us. We need to figure out the financial aspects of raising 2 more children, and Jack is considering looking for driving routes that would keep him closer to home. We're also in the process of legally adopting Max and Zoe, which brings its own set of challenges. But for the first time in months, I feel like we might make it as a family. It won't be easy, and it certainly isn't what we planned, but seeing Jack try, seeing the kids slowly open up to him, it gives me hope. We're taking it one day at a time, celebrating small victories, and learning to be a family of 5. Update 2. It's been 6 months since my last update, and I wanted to share some significant developments in our family situation. The past half year has been a roller coaster of emotions and events, filled with both challenges and moments of joy. The family counseling sessions have been incredibly helpful. Our therapist, Dr. Anderson, suggested that Jack spend one-on-one time with each child when he's home. This advice has made a world of difference in how Jack relates to all 3 kids. He and Max have been working on restoring an old car together. It's a 1967 Chevrolet Impala that Jack's uncle left him years ago. The car had been sitting in our garage, untouched, for as long as I can remember. Now, every time Jack's home, he and Max spend hours working on it. I often hear them laughing and talking as they work, discussing everything from car mechanics to Max's plans for the future. With Zoe, Jack has started taking her fishing at a nearby lake. It was awkward at first, neither of them knew quite what to say to each other. But over time, they've developed a comfortable rhythm. Zoe loves to read, and she often brings a book along. They'll sit in comfortable silence, occasionally broken by Zoe reading out an interesting passage or Jack quietly explaining a fishing technique. For Ethan, Jack has started a tradition of adventure walks. They explore the woods behind our house, collecting interesting rocks or leaves, and making up stories about imaginary creatures that might live there. It's beautiful to see how these walks have helped channel Ethan's energy in a positive way. However, not everything has been smooth sailing. About 2 months ago, Lisa, my sister and Max and Zoe's birth mother, showed up at our doorstep unannounced. I was in the middle of helping Ethan with his homework when I heard the knock. When I opened the door, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked healthier than the last time I'd seen her, her face fuller and her eyes clearer. Lisa claimed she was clean and wanted to reconnect with her children. I was wary, given her history, but I couldn't just turn her away. We agreed to supervised visits, which would take place at our house or in public places. At first, things seemed okay. Lisa was attentive during the visits, bringing small gifts and asking about the kids' lives. Max was cautious but polite, answering her questions about school and his hobbies with short, carefully chosen words. Zoe, too young to fully grasp the complexity of the situation, was excited to see her mom again. She would chatter happily about her friends and her favorite subjects in school. But then things took a turn. Lisa started showing up late to visits or canceling at the last minute. Once, she arrived clearly under the influence, her speech slurred and her movements uncoordinated. I sent her away immediately, but not before Max saw her. The look of disappointment and hurt on his face was heartbreaking. The final straw came when Lisa tried to convince Max to give her money, claiming she needed it for rent. Max came to me, confused and upset. He'd been saving up from his part-time job at the local grocery store, hoping to buy his own car when he turned 16. The fact that Lisa would try to take advantage of him like that made my blood boil. Max was devastated. He'd been hoping for a real relationship with his mom, and this betrayal hit him hard. He retreated into himself, spending more time alone in his room. Zoe, too young to fully understand, was confused and hurt by her mother's inconsistent behavior. She started having nightmares and became clingy, especially with me and Max. Surprisingly, it was Jack who stepped up in a big way during this crisis. He took a rare week off work to be there for the kids. I watched in awe as he navigated the situation with a patience and understanding I hadn't known he possessed. He had long talks with Max, sharing his own experiences with disappointment and how to move forward. He told Max about his own father leaving, and how he had struggled with feelings of abandonment for years. Seeing Jack open up like that, and seeing how it helped Max process his own feelings, was incredibly moving. With Zoe, Jack was patient and gentle. He sat with her through her nightmares, reassuring her that she was safe and loved. He helped her understand that her mother's actions weren't her fault, and that sometimes grown-ups make mistakes too. This experience seems to have cemented Jack's commitment to our expanded family. One night, after the kids had gone to bed, Jack and I sat on the porch swing, something we hadn't done in years. He turned to me and said, "I get it now. I understand why you couldn't turn your back on Max and Zoe. And I'm grateful they're part of our lives. We've decided to cut contact with Lisa for now, prioritizing the children's emotional well-being." It wasn't an easy decision, but after discussing it with Dr. Anderson and the kids themselves, we felt it was necessary. We've left the door open for future contact if Lisa can prove she's truly committed to recovery and maintaining a healthy relationship. On a positive note, Ethan's behavior has improved significantly. His teachers have noticed he's more focused and social at school. At our last parent-teacher conference, Mrs. Thompson, Ethan's main teacher, commented on how much progress he's made. She attributes it partly to the stable home environment and the positive influence of his older siblings. Max has been a tremendous help with Ethan. He seems to have an innate understanding of how to calm Ethan during his more difficult moments. Zoe, too, has shown a nurturing side we hadn't seen before. She often sits with Ethan, reading to him or helping him with his homework. We're not a perfect family by any means. We still have our struggles and disagreements. But we're making progress every day. Jack and I are communicating better than ever, making sure to have regular check-ins about how we're feeling and any concerns we have. For the first time in a long while, I feel hopeful about our future together. It's not the life Jack and I initially envisioned when we got married, but in many ways, it's richer and more fulfilling than I could have imagined. Update 3. It's been a year since my original post, and I wanted to share a final update on our family's journey. The past 12 months have been transformative for all of us, filled with challenges, growth, and unexpected joys. The biggest news is that Jack has decided to change careers. After much discussion and soul-searching, he realized that being away from home for long periods was no longer working for our family. It wasn't an easy decision. Trucking had been his life for over a decade. But seeing the positive changes in our family dynamics when he was home more often during his extended leave convinced him it was time for a change. Jack's now taken a job as a local delivery driver. It was a significant pay cut initially, but it means he's home every night. The transition hasn't been entirely smooth. Jack had to adjust to a new routine and the kids had to get used to having him around more consistently. There were some tense moments as we all adapted to the new normal, but overall, the change has had a profound impact on all of us. The kids are thrilled to have Jack around more. Ethan, in particular, has flourished with the consistent presence of both parents. His ADHD symptoms, while still present, have become more manageable. We've been able to establish more consistent routines, which has helped tremendously with Ethan's behavior and emotional regulation. Max, now 15, has really opened up to Jack. They've finished restoring that old Impala and Max is counting down the days until he can get his learner's permit. Jack's even talking about teaching Max the basics of truck driving if he's interested, a suggestion that would have been unthinkable a year ago. Zoe, at 11, has blossomed. With the stability at home and the consistent support from all of us, she's gained confidence and come out of her shell. She's joined the school drama club and, to our surprise, landed a lead role in the upcoming play. Jack hasn't missed a single rehearsal he could attend, and it's beautiful to see how much his support means to her. Our family dynamics have shifted and evolved. Max has taken on a big brother role not just with Zoe, but with Ethan too. He helps Ethan with his homework and has even started teaching him some basic car maintenance, much to Ethan's delight. Zoe has become the family peacekeeper, often diffusing tense situations with her gentle humor and kindness. We did face one significant challenge recently. Lisa made another attempt to re-enter the kids' lives, this time through legal channels. She filed for visitation rights, claiming she was clean and stable. The news hit Max and Zoe hard. Max retreated into himself again, while Zoe's nightmares returned. The ensuing legal battle was stressful for all of us, but it also brought us closer together as a family. Jack was unwavering in his support, even using some of his savings to help with legal fees. He took time off work to attend every court hearing, standing firmly beside me as we fought for what was best for Max and Zoe. Max and Zoe, now secure in their place in our family, were clear about their wishes to remain with us. It was hard for them, especially Max, to testify about their experiences with Lisa. But they showed incredible strength and maturity throughout the process. In the end, the judge ruled in our favor, maintaining our full custody and denying Lisa's visitation request due to her history and lack of consistent improvement. While it was a relief, it was also bittersweet, especially for the kids who had to formally cut ties with their birth mother. Through it all, our family bond has only grown stronger. Jack, who was once so resistant to the idea of Max and Zoe joining our family, now introduces them proudly as his children. The change in him has been remarkable, and it's reflected in how settled and happy our home has become. Looking back on the past year, I know I made the right decision in adopting Max and Zoe, despite the initial challenges it posed to my marriage. Our family may not look like what Jack and I initially envisioned, but it's filled with more love and joy than I ever thought possible. To anyone facing a similar situation, I'd say trust your instincts, be patient, and never underestimate the capacity for change and growth in those you love. Our journey hasn't been easy, but it's been incredibly rewarding, and I wouldn't change it for the world.